they're embarrassing sometimes. But God still wants to use them to talk about this dream that he has for them in the world. So verse 18, Jesus came to them because they're the ones that Jesus wants to use. Now, if you want to follow along in an outline form, here in Matthew 28, there's three things about Jesus we're going to see that really puts all this into proper context. Number one, we're going to see the person of Jesus, his very nature that makes all this possible. Because he goes on and says, look, guys, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Now, that word authority, we think of authority today. We usually sometimes directors who abuse people in those situations, and it's like, oh, it's horrible. Think about politicians sometimes who get in seats of power and they abuse that power. You think about somebody who's been over you sometimes. They've used that authority sometimes in a negative way and sort of made you know that you are under their authority. But I want you to think of authority in a good sense, the way Jesus used it here. For instance, let's say that you and your family are taking a trip and you take a vacation, you're out in the country. And while you're on this vacation, one of your loved ones, a spouse or a child, gets really sick, so you got to take him to the closest hospital you can go. It's like a little ER, country little hospital. And they examine your spouse or your child, and they go, this doesn't look good. And this young doctor who looks like he just came out of med school, he's like scratching his head. He's like he's like shrugging his shoulders, going, well, we think it's this. And then I'm demonstrated that I know all about the next life because I've defeated death. Therefore, you can trust me. I have the authority. Does that make sense? Based upon the one who rose from the grave, he is giving us a commission. The very nature of Jesus demands us to submit and obey. This is the one with all the authority, which leads us then to the command of Jesus. Verse 19, therefore, in other words, based upon this authority, you go and make disciples. In other words, as you're going about, you encourage other people to be followers of Jesus. Now, the word here that was a key word for his early disciples was go. They really struggled with this, didn't they? The first 10 chapters of the book of Acts, it takes them like 10, 15 years to finally figure out what it meant to go. Because they didn't go, they stayed. Because back in the Old Testament, from the time of Abraham to the time of Malachi, God told his people to stay there in the land of Canaan. Don't go anywhere, really. Because I'm going to bring the world to you. I'm going to bring everybody to your front door. The Hittites, the Egyptians, the Syrians, Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, they're going to come to you, and you're going to be the light to the nations. But now in the new covenant, he's switching strategies. Instead of you staying, I want you to go because you have now something that the Old Testament saints didn't have, the Spirit of God. And you are going to be a testimony. You're going to be a witness as you go now. But it took them a while to figure this out. And you go, and he says, you make disciples of all nations. And this word, make disciples, by the way, it's the only imperative. You know what I mean? It's really the only command in this whole thing here. The word go simply is a participle. It means it's a prerequisite. Before you can go make disciples, you got to go. You got to be there where they're at. But make disciples is simply the command, and everything else falls under this umbrella of making disciples. You baptize them, you teach them. By the way, what is a disciple? Let's back up. A disciple is a what? It's a learner. Someone who follows somebody. A student, we talked about this before, but not all students are good students. We're talking about someone who's sold out. The word means to attach yourself to. Church tells you that. Or your grandmother taught you that. The buck stops here, people, in this church. What does the Bible say? Baptism has a unique position here, because think with me here. I know, put your thinking cap on. if baptism is the first thing you do after you become a Christian, wouldn't it be in this latter category of teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you? Wouldn't baptism just be one of these things you do after you become a Christian, just a part of your duty as a Christian? But it's not there. It is something you do as a part of becoming a Christian. It is the prerequisite, it is part of becoming a disciple. Does that make sense? The way this is structured, it's not after, it's before. It's all pointing to becoming a disciple. It's part of becoming a Christian. It's not something you do after you're a Christian. Are you with me there? What emphasizes that even more is the way this is worded. Baptizing them in what? The name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That phrase, you remember when somebody's baptized, you hear people, I now baptize you, name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That isn't just any kind of language. The Holy Spirit chose that specifically because it means it was a transference of ownership. Like in the first century world, somebody had a piece of property, a house, or something like that. We still use that same kind of language today. Let me give you an illustration. For about the first 13 years of our married life, Cree and I, we really didn't have a car payment, right? And those were good years, even though I usually drove the hoopty, and she had a little bit better car. But it was okay because we had no car payment for like 13 years. We could take some pretty decent vacations, because we didn't have that money every month to spend on a car payment. I really try to follow the Dave Ramsey model, right? But can I confess, a couple of years ago, we were in a position where, man, we bought a van. And it wasn't brand new, but it was new enough where we had to take out a loan. Ugh. It just killed me to do that.